At closing time, the drawers slid open without ceremony. Inside lay a corded thing, brown and quiet, with knots pulled tight by hands long gone. One strand was not cotton, not camelid wool. It was human hair, spun into the record like someone refusing to disappear. The object was an Inka Khipu, a message made without ink, a record that hangs rather than lies flat and waits. UNESCO calls khipus the main record-keeping tool of the Inca Empire, and the only surviving record we possess from that ancient state. They do not speak easily now. Their knots sit in rows, as if keeping account no one in the room can hear. Khipus encoded information through fiber, color, twist, placement, and knots. The system may have carried numbers, names, duties, and memory. That is the trouble with a silent archive. It can be full of voices and still make no sound at all. UNESCO says hundreds of khipus survive in museum collections across South America, North America, and Europe, many far from their first rooms. Picture them at night, not in bright exhibit halls, but in drawers, wrapped in tissue, waiting behind blocks and climate gauges. The Harvard Khipu Database preserves electronic records for hundreds of examples, according to UNESCO, making scattered chords visible to researchers again. But a database can record the chord. It cannot always record the person whose fingers tightened it. In 2025, researchers at the University of St. Andrews examined human hair woven into one khipu known as KH0631. That number feels cold. A catalog sound. But the hair was warmer than a number. It had grown from a scalp. The St. Andrews team reported that some khipu makers may have signed their work with locks of their own hair. Quietly, a signature does not have to be written. Sometimes it is tied in place and left for another century to find. Stable isotope analysis can read chemical traces in hair, including clues about food, water, and the landscape where a person lived. Hair keeps a slow diary, not sentences, not confessions. Just meals, water, altitude, season. The body writes while no one watches. The isotope evidence from KH0631 pointed toward a diet characteristic of low-ranking commoners, not the elite officials often linked to khipu literacy. So the knot did something strange. It did not only carry a record, it carried evidence of who made the record. St. Andrews also reported hydrogen and oxygen isotopes suggesting the maker lived high in the Andes, between mountain elevations where cold air thins. Not a palace corridor necessarily. Maybe a workroom. Maybe a courtyard. Maybe someone bending close to fiber while the wind worried the roof. The study challenges the older idea that khipu production belonged only to high-ranking male bureaucrats within imperial administration. History often keeps the names of men with rooms. It loses the people with hands. The hands that make everything hold. Professor Sabina Hyland said the evidence suggests khipu literacy was more widespread and inclusive in the Inca Empire than previously assumed. Inclusive is a clean word. The object itself is not clean. It is brittle, darkened, and full of touch. Hyland also noted that women made most Inca textiles, so women may have been among the people producing and reading khipus. Imagine being taught that writing belonged above you, then finding a strand of someone ordinary tied inside the archive. The unsettling part is not that the khipu hides a secret, it is that the secret may be completely practical. Khipus could support accounting, administration, and communication across an empire that stretched through mountains, valleys, roads, storehouses, and communities. A knot can count maize. It can mark labor. It can remember tribute. It can say, in its own way, "This passed through me." Scholars still debate how much of khipu was numerical record-keeping, how much was narrative, and how much was another literacy altogether. We want a cipher, a key, a door that opens, but some doors open only onto another corridor. The Spanish colonial record often framed Andean knowledge through European assumptions, leaving khipus described by outsiders who did not fully understand them. That matters. If the wrong person writes down what you are, the mistake can live longer than you do. The St. Andrews finding does not decode KH631. It changes the question around it. Who was allowed to make knowledge visible? Soft breath. a commoner's diet, a maker's hair, a record that kept its author in the only material it could trust. There is intimacy in that, not the intimacy of confession, the intimacy of work done carefully, close to the body. Human hair preserves isotopic signals because it grows incrementally, locking chemical evidence into keratin as the body takes in food and water. So, the strand did not merely survive, it testified. Quietly. In chemistry, too small for the eye and too stubborn for erasure. Carbon and nitrogen isotope patterns help researchers infer social diet, while oxygen and hydrogen patterns help point toward geographic origin. Science did not make the voice. It only leaned close enough to hear what the hair had been holding. The study argues that participation in Khipu production may have extended beyond elites, complicating assumptions about literacy and authority. That complication is where the story breathes. A system built to remember may also have remembered someone it was supposed to forget. Khipus are now preserved as fragile cultural heritage, with digital databases helping document structure, color, chord direction, and knot placement. When we look at objects like this, one approach is patience. Not solving first, listening first, letting the record remain strange. Because strangeness is not emptiness, sometimes it is a language arriving from too far away to reach us whole. UNESCO's Memory of the World entry emphasizes the Khipu Database as a way to safeguard records dispersed across institutions. Dispersed is a gentle word for being taken apart. One chord here, another across an ocean. A memory filed under foreign lights. Many surviving Khipus lack clear archaeological context, which makes each material clue more important and each interpretation more careful. Remove a thing from its room, and it keeps the shape of absence. That is true of houses. It is true of archives. The Khipu in the drawer is not haunted, not in the cheap sense. It is attended by everything no one wrote down. The St. Andrew's announcement described the finding as evidence that upends older views of who possess Khipu literacy. Literacy can look like paper, if paper wins the war. But before paper, there was fiber. There was twist. There was memory under tension. The Inca Empire relied on khipus during the centuries before Spanish conquest, making them central tools of communication and administration. A runner could carry a message that did not flutter. It swung against the body, knots clicking softly in the dark. Researchers do not claim every Khipu was made by commoners. The evidence from this hair opens a door, not the whole archive. If this story is keeping you company tonight, a quiet like or subscription helps others find the room. No need to break the dark. The room matters. Late at night, a museum does not feel empty. It feels like every stored object has noticed the silence. The Science Advances study places H0631 inside a broader argument about social participation in knowledge-making across the Inca world. Knowledge-making. That phrase sounds clean, too. But it means fingers. Training, hunger, weather. A day's work done anyway. The finding supports the possibility that Khipu literacy was not confined to a narrow administrative class. Though the system remains partly undeciphered. Lauer. Partly undeciphered is a dangerous phrase. It reminds us that silence may be our failure, not the objects. Maybe the maker never meant to hide. Maybe the signature was ordinary then, a known practice. A small proof of responsibility. The St. Andrew's researchers suggest hair signatures could identify makers, giving scholars a rare biological link between object and artisan. A biological link. The phrase is clinical. The image is not. Someone cut hair from their head and placed themselves inside the work. Because the hair's diet signal was commoner-like, the maker of KH0631 may have stood outside the elite category once assumed. Outside the category. Not outside the empire, not outside memory. Just outside the story that later people felt comfortable telling. UNESCO's inventory work and academic databases keep expanding access. But access is not the same as understanding. If you explore Khipu databases, consider them entryways, not endings. Behind every record sits a community, a landscape, and a broken chain of custody. The broken chain is where the night gets in. Not as a monster, as a draft under a door no one opens. For now, KH0631 remains partly unread, but its hair has already changed the history around who could write without words. That is enough for one drawer. A cord that kept an account, a knot that kept a maker, a hair that kept a life. Somewhere in the dark, the knots are still tight, not waiting to be solved, waiting to be remembered correctly.